Hello, Ben Pearson, the Roadster Tracker here, and today I want to talk to you guys about the ability to launch things quickly into space. Now, I've had some desire to do this because there was an asteroid that came fairly close to Earth, and there were some people who were thinking that there was a chance it could hit it. I don't think that this was actually really a chance. It just kind of a interesting tidbit, and it caused me to start thinking, what would it take for us to hit an asteroid that was coming in the Earth to try to deflect it on short notice? So I also had news of the Firefly Alpha launch, which was the US government's attempt to do a quick response type of thing where they took a satellite and with short period of time were able to process it and to launch it into space. And the first quick demonstration of that actually happened this month. So let's talk about these different things and see what it would take to defend ourselves against an asteroid and what it takes to actually prepare a spacecraft. Now, the first spacecraft to really be a responsive space where you have very, very limited time was the Firefly Alpha launch. Recently, I forget the name, VICTUS NOX or something like that. I'll try to leave a name in the description. It is a very impressive capability, to be honest, and it sounds a little bit maybe less impressive to those who aren't in the know. They had 60 hours to ship the satellite to the launch site and to prepare it and encapsulate it. And then at 24 hours, they were given the launch coordinates and they had to be ready to launch. Now, granted, it may take a little bit of time for the orbital dynamics to shift such that you have an optimal launch window. In this case, it took 27 hours for the Earth to line up just right to be able to make the window, but that was still considered a success. And we were able to launch this satellite, which was a observation satellite, mostly intended for other spacecraft, which is kind of interesting. SDA, we don't know a ton about it because, of course, this was a Space Force mission. They want to keep things a little bit under wraps, but it is nonetheless an interesting mission, and the little pieces that we know are it's quite fascinating, to be honest. Now, this 60 hours is quite frankly astounding. Most companies take like a month to do the encapsulation. It depends on how many spacecraft you have, and of course the size of it will make a difference, but the ones I was familiar with took about a month to fuel them. We were doing as many as a dozen at a time, so some of that is the fact that there is more than one satellite being processed, and when you're just processing one, you can greatly streamline some things, but still very, very impressive. So what does it actually take to get a satellite ready to process? Well, you have to ship it to the site, and usually satellites have to have some kind of environmental control. You don't want to have them be too warm or too cold, so you usually have some kind of a special shipping container that will keep the temperatures in an ideal range. Then you take it, you have to unpack it. You probably charge the batteries to make sure that they're tip-topped. You will be taking a lot of things have to be done. There's remove before flight and insert before flight items where basically, up until the time that you're wanting to launch, you want to disconnect the batteries from the main loop. So that way you don't have to continually charge. The batteries will hold their charge for maybe a month if they're on their own, something like that. So you don't have to constantly sit there and charge them. You just have to maintain them every now and then because you want to keep the batteries at an optimal level. Well, when you get into launch, you obviously will need your batteries. And so you will have to go and remove this or insert something that will allow the batteries to be used. It's something very commonly type of things that has to be done. You will have some pins that are left in place for the shipping that you got to remove. You're going to possibly do some basic checking to make sure that the spacecraft is still alive, that it survived the transportation. And the biggest and most dangerous thing is to fuel the hypergolic fuels if you have them. Because you don't want to ship with these fully fueled, and it is a hazardous operation, so you got to do some practice of this. And to take some precautions, you have to limit the amount of people that are close by and do all sorts of stuff. It's really quite a dangerous process. Then once your payload is ready and you've done all of these, pre-flight checklists, then you have to mate it to the payload adapter, and then you have to mate the payload adapter to the rocket engine, rocket body, and then you have to put the stages of the rocket together. Now, it may be with Firefly Alpha, and I don't know the details of how they did this. They may have been able to mate it with the 2 stages put together so that they only had to effectively put the payload adapter on. The one I'm most familiar with is SpaceX's process, because I've done a little bit of work with some spacecraft that were launched on SpaceX, and they will put the payload adapter vertically, and then they will bring it to horizontal, attach it to the second stage, and then the second stage will attach to the first stage. So if everything's all ready to go, though, 60 hours is an incredibly short period of time to do this. And they were given a window of 6 months where this could possibly have happened, that they had to be ready to do this at any moment. It turned out that it was only a couple of weeks, but still, an impressive capability to maintain for a long time. And you don't want to leave a hypergolically fueled spacecraft around for too long, because, you have to be constantly monitoring it. The batteries, if you have taken all of the remove before flight stuff, done it right, then you have to constantly charge them, every couple of hours, really. And it's you have to really pay attention to the satellites as opposed to when they're in a more dormant state. So super impressive capability. And then 24 hours before the launch, they were given the orbital parameters that they needed to hit. And they had to do all kinds of simulations to make sure that they could actually meet that intended orbit and meet their safety requirements and so on and so forth. They actually launched at 27 hours after they were given the order, because of the Earth needed to get into the right view, but still super, super impressive. So let's get back to the asteroid defense. Now, in the case of Firefly Alpha, they had the spacecraft sitting, and they'd actually done some practice drills with this so that they could make sure that everything was capable. Really, the spacecraft is by far the longest lead issue. Rocket availability is another big issue, but let's just say you had something like Firefly Alpha or even a SpaceX. Quite frankly, SpaceX is launching enough launches. I think they could probably divert one of their Starlink launches to a critical national security mission given a short period of time if it was absolutely required. And, defending Earth, I am more than confident that SpaceX would be willing to do whatever it took. So why do you need a spacecraft? Why couldn't you just, ram a completely intact let's say that you were just desperate and you just wanted to ram it with whatever you happen to have. Say that there was a Starlink satellite pad on the launcher, and no, we're going to change the orbit to, specifically intersect this. Well, first of all, Falcon 9 would not actually be able to take the mass of Starlink and hit an asteroid in enough time where it would do anything good. So you'd have to reduce the mass. But if you happen to have the right mass, one of the big things is you need some kind of a guidance system if you're going to try to do a hit, like a dart style thing. The rocket bodies, they're pretty precise, but pretty precise in terms of a space rocket is within a couple of miles. If you're talking about trying to hit an asteroid, you got to hit it within a very, very small window. You have to be 1,000 times more accurate. So they have to have some kind of camera navigation on board that will help to guide them to the final loop. They're also probably going to need some kind of a fuel source, and quite frankly, that's probably going to be a hypergolic fuel, which means that you have to go through some of that extra processing stuff that we've talked about. So if you had a DART-style spacecraft that was ready to go, then, maybe we could launch this within a short period of time. Let's talk about that case, and assuming that we have the spacecraft available that could actually meet this mission on a short notice. What would it take? Well, first of all, you got to remove whatever payload that you have on your rocket so you can get the mast saved, and you would have to process the incoming satellite. Let's say that this was a practice thing similar to Firefly Alpha, where they had done drills with this so that they knew that they could do this. It would take probably a little bit longer than the 60 hours because, they were not given any notice. They didn't have the stage just ready to go like Firefly Alpha did. It was just sitting there waiting effectively for launch. So, give them maybe 72 hours of processing time and 24 hours to actually launch, which they could probably actually cut that down a little bit if they had the target window in mind from the get-go, which for the event of a satellite launch, we would have a pretty close idea of the orbit. They may have to do some tweaking even at the very last minute, which would be tricky to say the least. So if we did all of this, then, we could possibly launch within a couple of days. We may be able to hit an asteroid within a week or two that was close to Earth, but, would we be able to guarantee the divert? Probably not. More likely, you would want something a little bit more powerful, like a nuclear explosion, if you were trying to get it off of the Earth's course in a short period of time. So you could actually go to potentially like an ICBM even, intercontinental ballistic missile, and none of them though have the capability to launch a nuclear weapon even into low Earth orbit, let alone launching it to an asteroid that is far beyond Earth's orbit at the time. So you can't even really count on that. Bottom line is having the capability to hit an asteroid within a matter of a week might be possible, but we'd have to start working on that capability today. The best we could do is something that's like a responsive space type mission like Firefly's Alphas that we had talked about. And, we could reduce this time if we had the spacecraft sitting at a special hangar, but that takes a lot of extra resources to maintain it. You could cut the time in half, and quite frankly, you're better off spending your time to double the window that we would detect an asteroid rather than keeping the spacecraft fully fueled. It seems like a much, much better thing, but having a spacecraft ready to go could be of some interest. Now, we've detected any asteroid that's likely to cause a major, major event, but it's entirely possible that a, couple 100-meter asteroid could fall under the gaps and could end up impacting Earth, which that wouldn't destroy life on Earth, but it would be similar to a large nuclear bomb. So if it hit a city or even, a country, it could be devastating for that region. It would probably cause a little bit of a nuclear winter where the temperatures cool down for a little while, which, wouldn't be the end of the world, but it would not affect all of life on Earth. Still, it's a very interesting thing to think about and consider, and it's something that we should probably spend a little bit more time considering for the future. Thank you guys so much for joining me. Let me know whatever questions or comments you guys have. Until next time, keep on tracking. Take care. We will see you then. Bye-bye.